The great contradiction of so-called gender equality advocates is that they consistently argue for gender equality whilst advocating for preferential treatment of women. And that's why I will continue to call them gender communists, because they're not interested in the basic concept of equality most people are familiar with, equality of opportunity. No, they want to engineer an equality of outcome, which by definition necessitates discrimination to achieve that end. As Hayek said of social justice, it's the idea that the state should treat different people unequally in order to make them equal. To subscribe to the current year notion of gender equality, you have to subscribe to discrimination. And unfortunately, this mindset is not confined to some radical minority, it's actually government policy. And so to the latest example of state-sponsored female privilege in the People's Republic of Victoria. Police recruits given more chances to pass initial fitness test. Now, why would that be? Victoria police recruits will be given more support to pass an initial physical fitness test to get into the force under reforms designed to get more women in the ranks. The force's approach to the strict pass-fail fitness test will be modified so recruits who fall slightly short of the grade can be accepted as long as they meet other key criteria. Those recruits will be given extra training so they can pass the fitness test at a later date. The force is changing its approach after it failed to reach a target of 50% female recruits, despite vowing to tackle a culture of sexism in its ranks. Only 30% of current police recruits are women. Victoria Police will also revise its recruitment criteria to include an emphasis on skills including empathy, ethical decision-making, communication, and interpersonal skills. Well, that's all a bit vague, isn't it? So they still have to pass the test, but at some later date. It's not until the end of the article that we get the following. Victoria Police says recruits will be given more support to pass the fitness test, but will still be required to pass it before being fully accepted into the force. That fitness test involves a beep test, doing 5 successive push-ups on toes, holding a plank for 60 seconds, and a 30-kilogram grip test in each hand. So tough. It also tests recruits' ability to climb over fences, disarm offenders, and rescue unconscious victims. Police officers are subject to biannual fitness testing throughout their career, as they should be. So currently about 1/3 of women fail the fitness test as opposed to about 5% of men. So again, why are they doing this? Well, to get more women into the police force. It's no more complicated than that. They're bending the rules to get more women in. But listen to the extraordinary mental gymnastics they indulge in to avoid admitting this simple truth. A police spokeswoman womansplained that the force was not changing the requirements of the physical fitness test. However, we are looking at ways to strengthen our support for those who fall short. We don't want any applicants to be discouraged if they don't pass the physical aspect of the recruitment on the first try. Instead, we want to ensure they are provided with increased opportunities to develop their strengths in key areas so they have the encouragement and support behind them to hopefully succeed on the next attempt. But that's just clearly bullshit. It's not any applicants. If the female pass rate on the fitness test were the same as the male pass rate, you wouldn't be doing this because it wouldn't help any more women than men. So why pretend that this isn't aimed specifically at women? Well, because then you'd have to admit that there are differences between men and women. And of course, in the current year, that is tantamount to blasphemy. Also note that women are more likely to fail the exam. Maybe they should be given increased opportunities to pass the exam as well. I mean, given that the real reason is to increase the number of women. Hell, why not just go out in the street and hand out badges to random women and deputise them? Oh, don't be stupid. That would be condescending to women. Yes, it would. But giving them increased opportunities to pass a basic fitness test, that isn't. Now, a lot of what a police officer does in their day-to-day job is not particularly physically demanding, but on the odd occasion they do need to get physical, we'll all feel safer in the knowledge that they'll be able to deploy those vital skills of empathy, ethical decision-making, communication, and interpersonal skills. But this example of gender communism is fairly mild in comparison to the woke administrators at the University of Technology in Sydney. You see, to combat the low numbers of female engineering students, UTS has decided to lower standards for women. A hand up, not a hand out. UTS lowers engineering entry bar for women. The University of Technology Sydney will allow female school leavers to enter its engineering courses with a lower ATAR than males under a plan to boost the number of women in the field. The university applied to the New South Wales Anti-Discrimination Board for permission to give 10 ATAR adjustment points to female students applying for engineering and construction degrees next year. Many universities allocate adjustment points based on disadvantage or illness, hence the title of this video. But UTS Director of Women in Engineering and IT, Aarti Agarwal, said she believed the university would be the first to base them on gender, as though that's something to be proud of. Dr. Agarwal said a better gender balance will lead to improved student outcomes and better buildings and design in the wider world. Now, I talked to more than one engineer about the idea that more women in engineering will actually lead to better buildings. They told me it's absolute nonsense. What matters for good design is well-qualified engineers that know what they're doing, not whether they have a vajayjay or not. Now, you're probably thinking, did you really need to ask an engineer for that? No, but I like to check my facts, something that these two bobbleheads on Channel 9 don't.
We're all living in buildings and riding public transport and driving cars. I mean, surely, that female input ultimately is got to be a good thing.
Oh, my God, I can't remember how many buildings I've been in where you see something as a woman, you think, no,
the kitchen should not have gone there.
Yeah, whoever designed, some toilets in airports, you just go, no, you need somewhere for your makeup.
Well, just on that point, toilets everywhere, all over the world. How often do you stand outside public toilets and there's a queue for women?
Yes.
And no queue for men? And men are running in and out and the women are queued up.
Absolutely.
Can someone please out there provide more female toilets in public spaces?
Now, for a start, I'm reliably informed that engineers don't design airport toilets. Architects do. But the reason women have lineups to get into the toilet and men don't is because you take longer to piss. So perhaps if you stop preening yourself in front of the mirror and comparing yourself to every Cathy that walks in, you wouldn't have the problem. Or how about some genius woman come up with a communal trough-like mechanism so you can all take a squat together? Nah, that would be too hard. Let's just bitch and whinge instead. Lots of research has shown that teams are more productive when they are gender balanced. Yeah, tell that to the military. They come up with better ideas and better solutions. We women ride in cars, we use public transport, we do all kinds of things. If they're only being designed and engineered by one gender, then the requirements and needs of the other gender can get missed a bit. But they aren't being designed by one gender. There are female engineers. Why are you erasing the 20,000 female engineers in this country that already do that job? And there isn't much evidence outside of advocacy circles that more gender-balanced workplaces lead to better outcomes. For example, the now received wisdom that more women on corporate boards leads to higher company profits has been completely debunked by two female professors from Wharton University. They conducted a meta-analysis of over 150 academic papers on the subject and found absolutely no evidence for it at all. Now back to the bobbleheads on Channel 9.
The University of Technology in Sydney is lowering the engineering entry bar for female school leavers. They can get into the course with 10 fewer ATAR points, and this is part of a plan to get more women to study engineering and consequently get into the engineering workforce. Engineering is a very male-dominated industry and workplace, and apparently that is a big turn-off for women wanting to study engineering in the first place. Is this the way to turn it round?
Look, it is. It's the old saying, if you can't see it, you won't be it. And women look at that sort of field and think, ooh. And I think a lot of people are sort of saying, oh, well, this means women are getting into the course who won't be able to do it. And that's simply not true. More than half of Australian students who enrol in bachelor courses do so without the right ATAR. There's a whole lot of other things universities do. So positive discrimination, we know it works. And it makes the industries better, it makes businesses better. So I think this is a really positive move.
So if you're not acquainted with Dee Madigan, she has perfected the art of talking fast enough that the average person isn't aware of how much bullshit she's spewing. Let's take the first stupid statement. If you can't see it, you can't be it. Firstly, in 2016, there were almost 45,000 qualified female engineers in the Australian workforce, more than double the 21,000 just 10 years earlier, representing 13.6% of the total. So about 1 in 7 qualified engineers are female. That hardly makes them invisible. If you can't see them, then you're probably blind or you're deliberately not looking. However, this obscures a more important statistic. Being employed in the workforce doesn't mean you're working in an engineering role. Most female qualified engineers aren't actually working as engineers. In 2016, only 46% were, as opposed to 58% of men. So even qualified female engineers that make it through university are less likely to stick with it. Still, that leaves over 20,000 female engineers working in engineering roles. So they're there if you look for them. And think about the sexism embedded in the idea that girls won't aspire to be something if they don't see women doing it. Is Dee Madigan suggesting girls can't have male role models and vice versa? But I thought men and women were interchangeable in the gender communist utopia. Now, there has been research into the so-called role model effect. This paper published last year gives a decent review of the literature. The evidence shows that for young girls anywhere from preschool to the 4th grade, exposure to or interaction with counter-stereotypical role models can reduce gender stereotyping. However, they go on to note that, of course, the purpose of these interventions is to actually change behaviour, for young girls to aspire to those counter-stereotypical roles in adulthood. But as the paper notes, however, the assumption that stereotypes determine behaviour is problematic. Research has repeatedly shown that changes in stereotypes do not reliably predict change in behaviour. Specifically, studies have failed to find a significant change in girls' aspirations for counter-stereotypical occupations or preferences for counter-stereotypical toys following a brief exposure to gender counter-stereotypical role models. Thus, the lack of correspondence between girls' knowledge of what other women do and what they subsequently do suggests that stereotypes may not become internalised following short-term experimental interventions. Now, I've noted in the past the number of female GPs now exceeds the number of male GPs in Australia. But at some point in the past, the number of female GPs would have been equivalent to the proportion of female engineers today. Yet there was no lowering of standards for women or gender quotas. Why ignore the giant elephant in the engineering outfit in the room? Women are just less interested in engineering. I mean, it has absolutely nothing to do with aptitude or ability. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The proportion of offers to women in engineering courses with ATARs of over 90 is almost 60% compared to about 40% of all offers for men. It's not news that women are getting better results in high school and more are going to university. This has been going on for decades. And we should note that there's been absolutely no push to do anything about the ever-shrinking percentage of university students that are male. And if men outnumbering women in a course turns you off from taking it, then I doubt your commitment and interest in the first place. And of course, as we've already established, more women doesn't make industry or companies any better. This is just another talking point with no evidence to support it. This was about the only thing Dee Madigan said that was accurate. That's the sound of her brain coming into contact with facts. Now, of course, women that aren't gender communists and have some modicum of self-respect were offended by this move from UTS. They saw it as demeaning and condescending, because it is. And one of those women was first-year university student Alifa Monja, who wrote an article for The Age titled "Excruciatingly Generous, UTS ATAR Discount for Women So Patronising." And in it, she rightly points out that, how is it fair that out of 2 students with the same ATAR, only the one born with XX chromosomes is given this opportunity? Rather than being a step forward, the move feels like a step to the side. Some might even argue it's a step backwards. Yeah, I would. And she echoes what I noted earlier. It's not that girls aren't achieving the ATARs needed to get into engineering. The issue is that they don't want to study it. Lowering the ATAR requirement feels almost insulting. You don't need to lower your expectations. Girls are smart enough. And another woman by the name of Gabriella Harradine decided to start a petition against this move by UTS. As far as I can tell, she works at UTS as a student promotions representative. Sadly, even though she's opposed to the lowering of ATAR scores for women, she still has a touch of the female victim mentality. It's already hard enough to feel valid as a female in engineering, and now every woman that gets into engineering will be susceptible to further discrimination because it was made easier for them to get in. I suspect not feeling valid is your own problem, Gabby. If you got the grades, why wouldn't you feel valid? And what is the discrimination that women already face in engineering that you speak of? And do you have any evidence for it, or have you just been drinking the female victimhood Kool-Aid? Anyway, I'll leave a link to the petition. As usual, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you next time.